Good evening, everybody. My name is Sir Adler Bertelson, Ori Megalonics. I'm here to teach a simple chainmail construction class. I have four people here with me tonight. If anyone wants to say hello. All right. So this will focus primarily on some basic introduction for everyone, and then we're going to go into three different patterns for chainmail: box, Byzantine, and European 4-in-1. I have a slideshow that goes with this, and I'm going to go through the slideshow fairly quickly, just for the purposes of the video. But I'm going to go ahead and try to move along into the actual construction side, which is where I know everyone likes to be. So first, we're going to switch over to the presentation. And for the purposes of everybody else, let me go ahead and share the actual show with you. All right, so here's the agenda for the slideshow itself. Some basic terms. For the most part, you don't really need to be aware of this for simpler construction, but if you do go into more detailed construction, knowing your inner diameter, knowing your aspect ratios can be very important for more advanced uh, patterns. But it's good to just be aware of these terms in general for the future. All right, so some basic mailing terms here: open ring, closed ring, knuckle. You'll be able to see a really good example of knuckle. There's one on the screen, but open ring. So usually when you buy rings in bulk, they will be slightly open. The ends might be touching, but they'll be off center. What it means for an open ring is actually there's a sizable gap that you purposely put in there so you can slide other rings onto it. Closed ring means you actually have gotten the ring ends together and they're actually butted together and they're square against each other. All right, so here's the box pattern. Here's pros and cons. Not going to linger on that for too long. Byzantine and box are actually fairly close together, not just in how they look, but also in putting it together. Byzantine literally has one extra step than the box chain. And then, of course, the European 4-in-1. This is the one that everybody knows. This is the one that every chainmail shirt is made out of. When people first start, generally they like to start with this one. I can tell you this one can be kind of difficult when starting off, but once you learn how to do it, it's super easy, and it's actually it can be a pretty fast pattern. All right, I'm going to walk through all of these, if you can't tell, starting with the box. For future things, just know that there's a lot of different things that can be put into your chainmail. All right, so for those who have them, I encourage you to try it during the class. If not, you can always come back and watch this video again. Pliers, various sizes, designs, shapes. Best to go with something that you feel comfortable with holding. When you're working with a chainmail, when you're putting together a chainmail piece, it's good to have a small container so you can keep your rings in, because let me tell you, these rings fall on the ground, they scatter everywhere, and you will lose them every time. All right, for safety notes, anytime using pliers, there's pinching hazards, there's puncture wound problems when you're dealing with stronger metals. And always, if you haven't done chainmail before, if you don't do a lot of crafts that involve really, really dexterous movements of your hands, definitely take breaks. It can cause pain to your hands, in your wrists. If you have any issues with your wrists or your hands, you are going to want to take those breaks even more. There's definitely people who can attest to that out there. All right. So always with construction, everything begins with that first ring. I can't stress this enough. When you are learning how to chainmail, closures will make your piece look amazing. So I guarantee your first attempts will look disgusting. They will look awful. Happens with everyone. My closure didn't really start getting good until I got through my 10,000th ring. So it takes time, it takes some effort, but just know everyone who does chainmail, they eventually get it. All right. Yes, 100%. And I have an example on the next slide, actually. So it doesn't matter quite as much for the box in the Byzantine, but with the European foreign one, orientation when you're adding rings together, extremely important. If it is, somebody always messes it up every time I do this. They'll put in the ring in the right, and they'll put the one ring into the correct rings, but one will be off. It'll be 90 degrees, 180 degrees off, and then the pattern just doesn't work. And I will point out that step when we get there. One other thing about chainmail is a rather nice crafting form. You can add to it and you can take away from it very easily. For example, with wood, once you cut it, that's what it is. You can't put wood back on. With chainmail, it's the opposite. You can add rings. If you get too much, you can take it off, or you can put back on. And so it's fairly easy when it comes to sizing something for someone to wear or someone to put up and decorate. Resizing is very, very nice. All right, so prepping the rings. Large projects can benefit in efficiency by opening and closing rings beyond their normal point. So if you have a very large pattern, there's some rings that you don't have to put onto other rings. You can actually have an open ring, put it into the pattern, and then put a closed ring on it, and close one, and now you've done. You have two rings for the price of one for your time. So when you're first starting learning, it may work, may not work very well for you, but after you've done this for a while, and once you're very familiar with the pattern, you'll be able to pick up, hey, which rings can I go ahead and close now, and which ones should I have open, ready to go. And I'll show you what you can do with the three patterns tonight. So when you're opening these rings to put other rings onto them, make sure to not open them too much. That can actually cause weakening of the ring itself. You also want to make sure that you're thinking of these rings three-dimensionally. If you look down in the picture, there's three pictures there. The one on the left, the ring is actually bent like that a little bit. So always make sure when you're opening them, when you're closing them, don't also be bending them in a third dimension, because that can happen fairly easily if you're putting too much strength into it. Let's see what else. When you're putting the rings together, sometimes you'll have a gap between the ends. Sometimes the ends will overlap a little bit. And actually, if you hear a tink when you're closing the rings, that means that they were slightly overlapping, but it can actually be a good thing because they're wanting to be more together than if they were just kind of sitting there with a tiny little gap. So this all comes with practice. Don't expect this all to make sense for the first few times you do this, but after a little while, these are things that you should start to pick up on. All right, so here we go. The entirety of the box instructions are in the single slideshow page right here, the single slide. When I make a box or even a Byzantine, and you'll see that on the Byzantine slide, I like to make a little chain of like three or so rings, just so that it has something to grab onto. The box has lots of little knuckles along the pattern, and those knuckles have to be kept in place, because if you let them go, the knuckle just kind of falls apart. So I like to add that on the front and also on the end, just so that it stays in place. Okay, I'm going to go through. Go ahead. So 4 through 6A is like constructing of a knuckle. 6B is a knuckle with like two extra rings in it, but it's easiest to see on number 7. Number 7, there's actually 2 knuckles that are side by side. Okay. That is the pattern itself right there that you can see. It doesn't really look like it because the knuckles are connected together, but that's 2 distinct knuckles in 7. Yeah. Yes. Yes. It's a little easier to see in the Byzantine because there's a gap between the knuckles, but the knuckle of the box is the same thing as the knuckle of the Byzantine. And let's go ahead and go there. Here's the Byzantine. If you'll notice down in 7B, you have the same knuckle in 7B as you did in 7 for the box. It's just there's just one of them now, and instead of having another knuckle right next to it, you have those orange rings in between them. And really, that is the only difference between the box and the Byzantine, is you have an extra pair of rings in between the knuckles, and that's it. Otherwise, it's the same pattern. Questions? Does that help? So generally, a box will be used for a necklace. It's just one single strand. That's usually what a box is for. A Byzantine, sometimes people will do that, but it can also be used for other things. You can actually connect, because if just focusing on those orange rings, because those orange rings are there, you can actually connect another knuckle of Byzantine and have it going off in another direction. So instead of having 2 knuckles on those orange rings, you can have 3, 4, and depending on your ring size, you can even have more than that. You can actually make something similar to like a see-through fabric made out of Byzantine chain, and you can just simply make it into a whole plane of Byzantine chain. That's an example. No. Yes. Form 1 is the standard simple weave to make armor with. Byzantine is going to have large gaps in it. The box does not do well on making it into a large sheet. It's just one single row, and that's really all it's good for. So, absolutely. Oof. It's not something that I have tried myself, but I understand exactly what it is. It's a bit rough. I would classify it as at least advanced. That's not something I would throw at you tonight at all. Highly recommend you stay away from that. It's pretty to look at. It is not easy to make. It's partly because it's so dense. And if it's 8 and 2, that means each ring position is doubled. So there's 2 rings where 1 ring would be in the regular pattern. So I'm sure that thing was very heavy. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yes, I wouldn't want to make that if I didn't have to. That is that's a love project right there. That's what that is. All right. Speaking of that kind of thing, European foreign one, it has enough steps where I actually have it on 2 slides. Um, so unlike unlike the Byzantine in the box, you just go straight into making the pattern. I obviously I used color to help differentiate where different rings were to go. So it really just starts with 4 rings on one ring, and then you just start adding to it. This this slide really just shows you how to make a 2-in-1 simple chain, and that's all it really is to start off with. It's step 6 that is the thing what trips everybody up. So step 6 requires you to lay out your string flat, and so that 1 row of rings, well, the double rings all lay down in the same direction, but you split 1 row from another row, because if you look with the orange ring is going through 2 of those blues, but it's going through in a very specific way. If the orange ring were to go through either of those blues and even just one of them was off, the pattern would just become a mess. So you get the orange ring in there, and then you add 2 loose rings, and then you close it, and then you add another orange ring 1 position over. So that second orange ring is actually inside of one of the 2 rings that the previous orange one is in, and then you suck up one of the closest of those loose rings into that second orange, and then you add another loose ring and then close it, and you just continue that down as long as you can get past step 7 without any errors. You can keep that going pretty easily. Well, actually, no. Sorry, step 8. If you can get past step 8 without problems, you're doing good. And really, everything else after that is just repeating that pattern. As literally as big as you want. You can make it into. It doesn't have to be a square. It doesn't have to be a rectangle. You can make it into a sheet that rolls onto itself. You can make a Mobius loop with it. The pattern doesn't really care. It's a sheet that works a lot like a piece of paper. So the best thing I would recommend is make a section first. Get a few rings of the size that you want to use, and make a section that's the width of the sash, and maybe and make it 1 inch long, 2 inches long, something like that, and then stretch it out. One thing about European foreign one, it stretches. If it's pulled in one direction, it's thin. If it's pulled in the other direction, it stretches out. So definitely make a small section, pull it taut in the direction that you want it to be, and measure that, and then do the math from there. The easiest way to do the math on a square section like this, you take the number of rings that stick out on one side and the number of rings that stick out on the other side. Okay, that's one square. So it's the row times the columns, and then you add to that the row count minus one and the column count minus one. That'll give you the interior rings, and that's how you do the math for European foreign one. Kind of a bit of a pain, but it'll at least get you really close to what you're looking for. Okay. All right. So in addition to what I'm doing here, there's certainly things on the internet. YouTube is a fairly good resource. However, most tutorials that you find on the internet is either a computer generated video or a pattern, or it'll be someone like me just trying to explain it and maybe show you how it can work. Generally, there's not a lot of tutorials for the more advanced things. Generally, it's just a picture, and people say it's this pattern with this size ring, and you're kind of on your own from there. That's most of what is on the internet. Now, if you're looking to buy rings en masse, the most well-known site that's out there for bulk orders is something called the Ring Lord, as you can see on the slideshow. And then there are websites that actually show you different patterns that are out there. Chainmailers, mail artisans. Those are the two easiest ones that I've found that work fairly well. They go into some very, very advanced patterns. There's some that are simple. There's some that are very advanced, and there's some that are just kind of weird. Somebody was just trying to putting rings together, and then they made something that no one's ever done. They took a picture of it and bam, put it on the website, and gave it a name, even though it's a mess. So just be careful if you're trying to find some more advanced stuff. Take everything that you see with a grain of salt. Sometimes it's easy, sometimes it's not so easy. A lot of the times with advanced things, you do not have the size rings that you need, because aspect ratio is that inner diameter compared to the thickness of the ring itself. That the difference between those two things is very important with a lot of patterns. The ones that we're doing tonight, they are very easy on that aspect ratio. They work with many different ranges of aspect ratios. So almost any rings that you can get will work just fine with these. But the more advanced things, the more advanced a pattern is, the tighter really a pattern gets, the more important that aspect ratio becomes. And again, that's more advanced things. We're not going to cover those tonight. There's not enough time, really. Okay, so here I have the 3 examples that are in the slideshow. So can someone give me a color? I have a bunch of colors here. So which purple? I have this. This is called black ice. It's like a darker silver. That's the closest I have to actual white. Generally, rings do not come in white. I've never really seen white rings that weren't painted. Yes. All right. So first, we're gonna go over the box. So I'm gonna pick an off color. So please bear that in mind. Don't yell at me. So yeah, gotta make sure you can see it. All right. So I'm using specialized pliers. These are nylon tip pliers. If you want to use aluminum, I would recommend these because these will not scratch any colorization. All right, so I'm going to close to orange. These are just to hold. That's it, just to hold the pattern in place. All right. And then one more. Open that. Stick that on there. And stick another one on that. All right. Okay, and here we have our initial starter ends, kind of like the red right here. All right. So we'll take two of our purple. We will open them. And then we're going to take two of our black ice color. And sometimes these are connected. You just have to be smarter than the ring. Okay, so we're actually going to close these two. Okay. So for box, you can do two open, two of the same color open, and then two of the same color closed for your knuckle. So we take our end, we put one of our open purples on, and we stick our two black ice on with it. And we close. So I got to do this in real time. And then we take our other purple and put it on there right next to that first purple. And we close it. And please, if there's at any point you have questions, you want me to slow down, want me to speed up, just say so. All right, so at this point we have two purple and two black ice. Okay, at this point, this is where the box gets tricky. And it only gets tricky once. All right, for the purposes of this video, I'm going to go ahead and open the next two purples. Because that will simplify the construction. And close the next two black ice. So they're ready to go. If you want to make a long string of the box, if you have a good idea of how long you want it to be, you can do a fairly good estimate for how many rings that you want. And you can go ahead and open up, in this particular example, you can open up a whole bunch of black ice close a whole bunch of black ice and then open a whole bunch of purple so that everything's ready to go and you're not trying to start and stop every single time you want to do a knuckle. Okay, so here we start out by taking our purple and then we put the black ice to either side, and then we want to open the purple to get to the inside of that. All right, then we take one of our open purples and we just pick up the black ice into that ring. Like that. Everyone see? Did that make sense to everybody? Okay, and that's it. That is the extent of the complexity of this pattern. Everything else is just repeating what I just did. Monkey paws are a little bit more complicated. But, okay. So, just like we did with the orange ring, we're going to put our next two black ices on, close our purple, and then we just put our second open purple next to the one that we just closed. And that's it. Now, right now, I have one completed knuckle on here. Okay. And I have another set of rings that are ready to be made into a knuckle. So if you don't have this extra bit on the ends, they'll just sit here like this. You can try to go ahead and put them in the right position, but without anything holding it, it's just gonna fall loose. Okay, so I think this one's ready to go. So I'll go ahead and make another quick orange bit just to hold it. So we're only gonna go 2 knuckles with this pattern tonight. But I'm sure you can see how to extend it to 3 and much, much further beyond as far as you want. Okay. So I'll do this one more time for the sake of the video. We move our black ice to either side. We open up the purple to get to the inside. And if you've done this pattern a lot, you'll get to the point where your fingers will automatically just push those black ice ends up for you to grab. It just takes a little bit of practice. Okay. So go ahead and close that. And boom, that's it. Did you hear a snap? Then yes, that's it. I have headphones on, so it's a little bit harder for me to hear what's going on. Yeah. All right, so I'll set that right there. And one thing about box, and actually Byzantine does this a bit too, if you have tension on it, it's nice. It's nice and oriented, and you set it down, and it kind of just looks all funky. But you can quickly pick it back up, and it pops right back into place. Usually, sometimes you need to flip a ring around, and then it'll be just fine. Okay, so let's get 2 or 3 new colors. Pink. Okay, we're gonna go with some pink. Pink and blue. All right. Do we want to have a third? Don't have to. My yellow is downstairs. I can. Red? Okay. Okay, so here. Go ahead. Complicated one. I don't remember what the pattern is offhand, but Stormy might be able to help with that. Okay, so for coloration, we have green, we have blue, and we have orange on the pattern. What would you like to be the orange? Red, pink, or blue? Red? Okay, so blue and pink with red in the middle. Okay. All right. So just like before, I'm going to have a small section of orange on the end to hold it in place, just like the box. And just one moment to get that created and put on. Oh, for your purposes here, I've got it really close to the microphone, and of course this one doesn't do it. Did you hear it? Okay. So yeah, that's if it makes that sound, it's the ends are tight together. Okay. I generally just go with whatever's available. I'll go to Michael's, and they almost always have a pair, especially in the beading area. That's just where they are. All right, so we said red in the middle. Okay, so just like your box, you're going to have 2 open. And then 2 closed. Okay. All right, so blue, 1 blue, and then 2 pink. And then your paired blue with it. Okay. So here's everything I've done here is the same as the box. Where we're going to differentiate between the box and Byzantine is this is where I pull out 2 reds. And we're going to open both reds. And we're going to put in our red onto the pink. Okay. Notice how I'm not adding a pair of closer rings here. That's because if you were to try to do 2 open, 2 close, 2 open, 2 close back and forth with Byzantine, then you're going to have a problem when you get to your next knuckle, because you're going to be having an open. You're trying to add an open ring to what should already be a knuckle. So at this point, we are at the same point as we were with the box, but we have a different color here because we're going to go slightly different. So with the coloration here, because of what we're doing, we can either start with another 2 blue and have the pattern kind of the same, or we can add 2 pink and have it be blue to a pink to a red, back to a pink, back to a blue. So for this demonstration, I'm going to do pink first. So open 2 pinks. And I don't know if you saw it. It might have gone past the screen, past the camera a little bit too fast. One of those pinks just flew off into the void. So it's gone until I find it with my foot sometime soon. Okay. So unlike the first one, we're going to have 2 pinks open and 2 blues closed instead of the 2 blues open and 2 blues open and 2 pinks closed. So here we are adding our open ring, adding our 2 blues. We're closing just as if we're doing a box. And we add our paired pink with it. And closing that. Okay. So at this point, we have, notice we have 3 paired colors here. So we're going to take the next ring and use that to create the knuckle and lock it in place. And there we have Byzantine. And that's it. One of the things that this does, differing from the box pattern, is if you'll notice on the box pattern, the knuckles are all oriented the same way over and over and over again. On the Byzantine, they're mirrored. So they go back and forth. And actually, go ahead. Yes. And one other thing that this does, which is partly the reason why it will make large holes in a sheet, is if you look at this right here, this is essentially the same pattern. See, you have these two rings that are kind of facing towards each other. Your rings between the knuckles flip. So one is open towards you. The other one is flat, perpendicular to the camera. So these will flip back and forth. So the next one would be another flat, and then another perpendicular, and so on. So if you were to add another knuckle to say this one, these would flip to the side, and you'd have 3 spouts coming off of here. But you couldn't do the same thing on this side as a sheet. One way to get around this problem is to add one more pair in between them, but generally speaking, that doesn't look very good. So play around with it, see what works, 100%. One of the biggest things about chainmail is creativity. It's all about playing around with it, seeing what works. If it works, great. If it doesn't, well, you try it, and you can try something else. All right. Did everyone follow that? Did it make sense? Okay, good. All right, set that one down. Okay, now we come to the one that I have had the most problems trying to teach people. And that is the European 4-in-1. Okay, so would we like to have 4 different colors like this one? Just to help differentiate for you. Okay, so let's pick 4 colors again. Really? Okay, everyone pick one color. How about that? There's 4 people here. Let's pick. Everyone gets a color. Go ahead. Sounds good. I will put it on the Facebook post as well. Okay. So everyone pick one color. Light green. That is actually brown. It's just brown. That's what it's listed as. Okay. Contrasting colors when learning can be very helpful. Very good. This is not meant to this does not necessarily need to look pretty. So we have black, red, pink, dark green. Okay. All right. I'm going to move these. Okay. So unlike the other patterns, how I started with the 3, this one I can just jump straight into the pattern. All right. All right. So let's get some brown. Let's get 1 green, 2 blues. Can you see that? No, you can't see those. Okay, so for this pattern, for the first chunk, we're gonna close 4 of these rings. So the 2 blue and the 2 brown, they are gonna get closed, and then we're gonna open the green and put all 4 rings onto it. So 2 blues, 2 browns. When you're doing various colors like this, how you put them on can be important. When you're doing just say a single color, it's not quite so important. Okay, so when you're adding rings in this particular way, you want to keep the blue and the brown oriented like this. All right, so let's do another 4x4 section like this one is. So we're gonna go ahead and open 2 more greens, and we're gonna open. We're gonna close 2 more blues. So one of the biggest problems with nylon jawed pliers is they can start to indent. Being made out of nylon, they do compress to some degree. This brown is very tangled. Loosen the brown. And again, when you're doing this with one color and one color only, say if you were making it in stainless steel, how you put these on really wouldn't matter. But for our purposes tonight, for keeping the color scheme, you got to make sure the blues go on one side and the browns go on the other. So for our piece here, we're just making a simple 4 wide, and then we'll go through and make 4 long as well. Can't forget to put on your rings. Happens all the time. Okay. Again, after you do this for a while, you start to get obsessive with your closures. Okay, so here we have our string of 4. All right, I'm going to go ahead and open the 3 reds, 1, 2, 3, that we need for the next row. Just set them there. And right now this blue is on top, so we're going to need 4 browns. One, 2, 3, 4. Okay. So this is where people get mixed up with this pattern. This point right here. Okay, so this is the point where you have to take most care when you are first learning how to do this. Okay, so here we have our red. We have our 2 blues. Okay, we're gonna go in from the top down into the first blue, and the bottom up on the second blue. Okay, and make sure you're only getting to the blues. You don't want to get into the brown. You don't want to get into the green. Okay, so you have to go down 1 and back up through the other. Okay, so you're essentially hooking. You're hooking the red into the two blues. Okay, everyone clear about what I just did? Okay. So once that's in, you add 2 browns. Okay, that's it. Doesn't matter how the browns. What? Yeah, this one right here, totally aluminum. All right, so and you close it. Okay, when you're doing this by hand, sometimes most of the time people will pick it up and hold it in their hands. So they put it on the table and they put the ring in where it's supposed to go, and then they pick it up to actually close it, and then they set it back on the table, and it's a mess. Okay, this is all. Oftentimes, this is where people will mess themselves up. So if you pick it up and put it in your hand, and then you put it back on the table, make sure to get all the rings back oriented the way that they're supposed to. Absolutely, absolutely. So when back when I talked about the math, the rows and columns, the first multiplication, the row and the column, that is all the rings that are leaning one way. The second math, where you take the row number and you minus 1 and the column number and you minus 1, that's for all the rings laying the other way. Okay. Does anyone have any questions about that? Does anyone want to just move on because they don't want to think about math? Okay. All right. So moving to the next position. Notice how this green and that red line up. So your next red is going to line up with the next green. To keep things simple, we're just going to, let me find a little, get my big fingers out of the way. We're going to move this brown out of the way. Okay, we're not going to worry about that brown just yet. Okay, we'll worry about that a little later. Okay, so for now, what we're doing with this red is the same thing as we did with the last red. We put it from the top down into the blue and the bottom up through the next blue. Okay, that should look to you the exact same way as the last red one before we put any rings on it. Okay. Once we've done that, once that's looking correct, we'll take this brown and we'll just flop it over and stick it in the red. Okay. That brown now belongs to both of those two reds. Okay. And then we just take our next brown and throw it on there. It's loose. It's only going to be connected to that one red for right now. Okay. And then we close it. Oop. Okay. And then we'll lay this down in the worst possible way. Now we just need to stretch the piece out and get it to laying back the way it's supposed to. And again, once you get used to this pattern, you won't need to do this all the time. In fact, you won't need to do this hardly at all. You'll just get used to where the rings are supposed to be, so you'll be able to just hold it in your hand and just put these rings together. But again, this is meant to be simple. So when you are first starting out, the best thing to do is to, once you get a ring on there and closed, put it back down, make sure everything fits correctly, is oriented correctly, and is correct. Okay. So after that, it's just, again, just another repeat. So we'll move that brown out of the way. We'll take our last red. We'll stick it down through the first blue and then up through the second blue. And there it is. We'll bring our brown over, stick that on. And then we take our last brown and we'll throw that onto there. Sorry if I'm getting off camera a little bit. So here we have our 2 browns on our red, and we'll close that. And all we have done so at this point is we've just added a row all the way down. So some European foreign one really likes to be petted. You pet it and it's more likely to lay flat for you. All right. So we have our second row of brown. So we'll do 1, 2, 3 open greens. 1. Yeah, sorry. I'll move down so it's easier. 1. 2. And 3. And then we will have 1, 2, 3, 4 closed blues. 1, 2, 3, and 4. All right, so just like we did with our red, we're going to take our first green and we're going to line it up to that first red. Now, after you do this for a while, where you start the next row doesn't really matter. You could start it on the right side, you could start it on the left side, you could start it in the middle. Just whatever works for you. But we're going to keep it simple. So we hold that in place. Green goes down through one and then up through the next. And then we throw blues on. 1, 2. Okay. And all we're doing is the exact same thing we just did on the last row. As I mentioned, puncture wounds are a danger. All right, so as I go ahead and finish this, because all I'm doing is just repeating everything that I've already done, please feel free to ask questions. If you want me to show it a slightly different way, now is the time to ask. So generally for rings, you won't break them using different pliers. It's how you bend the rings which will ultimately cause the rings themselves to break. Now, if you're talking about scratching of color, that is something that would happen with regular pliers, such as these that have metal tips, or these which not only have metal tips but also have grooved jaws. Those scratch aluminum very easily because they're made out of hardened steel. With the nylon tip jaws, they can actually be a little bit tougher to hold because they're made out of nylon, so they can be very slippery. If I were to squeeze this too hard, this ring would shoot out into the next room. But the hardened steel jaws, they grip a lot better, but they cause damage. They won't necessarily break the ring, because breaking the ring would be here's a bad ring. It wasn't cut correctly, so I can use it as an example. Oh. Did I lose everybody? Okay. It's something happened on my end. Okay, so here we are with our metal tipped pliers. I mean, I can bend that just fine. It doesn't really do a lot of scratching as long as I'm careful with it. But if you make a lot of pieces, if you're bending a lot of rings, it's very easy to accidentally slip a little bit, and then it causes some scratching. Now, for actually breaking a ring, if you were to bend this really far, like really open her up, and you were to do that a few times, the aluminum just shears off. And now you have two separate pieces of ring. Okay. So breaking a ring, damaged ring, there's differences there. If you're dealing with, say, stainless steel, by all means use hardened steel pliers. If you're using aluminum, that's when you need to be concerned about, am I going to scratch this? Is scratching going to make it look bad? If it is, definitely go with the nylon tip jaws. If it is aluminum that doesn't have coloration, it's not anodized, it's not painted, there's no color, it's just straight aluminum with no coloration, then that's when I would recommend considering something that's maybe steel but has a smooth jaw rather than actual grooves in it. Okay, is there any questions a bit more about this or these? Mm-hmm. Okay, go ahead and switch back to this. Oh. Mm-hmm. So if you're doing a piece that's a sheet like this, um, it's actually very easy to open the rings. And actually, if you have a large sheet of European foreign one, and you just made like a large, like say one like this big, but you only wanted it to be as, the size and shape of my head, you can make the whole thing and then just start opening up the rings and pulling off the excess in the shape of my face, or the shape of a circle, or a triangle. It is actually very very easy to do that with a sheet of European foreign one. There are other patterns that are not quite as easy, but close to as easy. So if from what I understand, what you just said, make a large sheet and then cut it down, it's actually can be the ideal way to do it. If you're not sure what size you need it to be, make it a minimum size, and then just remove sections and chunks that you don't need. All it takes is just opening a section, opening a line of rings, and then the whole piece will just come off. So square. I assume you mean square rings. So when you're looking at a ring, so it's maybe kind of hard to see. This is a round ring, so the cross section of it is a circle. Square rings, the cross section is square like that. There's not necessarily any particular any advantage or disadvantage other than kind of the way it looks. If you have square rings and you make a piece out of it, and as you wear it or do things with it, it'll rub those nice sharp edges down a little bit. So it's something to consider if you want to make a piece like that. But mostly that's just aesthetics. It can play around. It can mess up your aspect ratio calculation. So that's another thing to be considerate of. But otherwise, if you're just making a piece that the aspect ratio doesn't matter too much, really, it's just how you want it to look. So I will say square rings on the right piece look very nice. They look very nice. So the rings that I have that I use tonight are 16 gauge, 5/16 inner diameter, and that is generally very common. There's a lot of people who work in sizes a little bit bigger or a little bit smaller. A lot of the jewelry makers use very small rings. We're talking gauges as small as 20 or even 22 gauge, which is almost just a piece of wire. You can so with 16 gauge 16 gauge aluminum rings, I can open and close these with my fingers alone. And smaller gauges, the higher the number of the gauge, the thinner the piece is. So a thinner ring starts to open very, very easily. That is why generally you don't want to make large pieces that you wear and say run around with out of just aluminum, because that wear and tear, that constant pulling, can actually open the rings up, and then they'll start to fall off, and your piece just starts to little bit by little bit fall apart. So that's something to consider when making a large piece for armor. Now, if it's a necklace, necklaces work just fine with aluminum. There's not a lot of pull on them. Yeah, but the larger the piece, the stronger material that you want to use. And generally with metal, making a piece stronger means increasing the gauge that you're using, and increasing the gauge size changes the aspect ratio. So it's a lot of just give and take, maybe a little experimentation just to find what works best. Yes. So which one's more expensive? I know which one's more expensive. I'm gonna have you look that up, and then I'll explain. I'm giving you a little homework. It's a little bit Q&A, some interaction. Okay. So machine cut means there's a machine. So what you don't see is that all of these rings were once a piece of wire. The wire was wrapped around some sort of, you know, either a big pole or just something. So all the wire was just wrapped around, and then they were cut. Machine cut means something's there, essentially like a pair of scissors for aluminum or steel or whatever the material is, and just snip, 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 snip. Saw cut means someone sat there with a saw and just cut through the material. Saw cut gives a much smoother butted end together. So with grab one here. I just have rings sitting everywhere. Okay, so if you take a close look at that end, you can kind of see that there's kind of a gap there. There's the two ends of this ring are touching. But even though they're touching, there's still gaps of material that are missing. Okay? So that means when they cut the ring, they remove part of that material, so the end of the butted end of the ring is not flat. It's a little off. Well, let's go this way. It's a little off center. So they can be touching, but there's still gaps between them. Okay, saw cut makes smooth cuts through the rings, so they touch all the way across. It might give you a little bit of increased strength, but at the end of the day, these two pieces, the two ends of the rings are just essentially touching together. There's nothing physically attaching them, so they can still slide when there's forces applied to the ring. But what it does do is it creates a very, very smooth finished product. And when you're making high quality pieces, such as a necklace or anything that touches directly to skin, having those very, very flat butted ends together can reduce gripping of hair. It can reduce scratching that you feel when you're wearing a piece of chainmail. And it does actually look a little nicer. It's for the look part, you don't really see that unless you get really close into the piece. But if you're, say, entering something into a competition, judges will notice that kind of thing every time. Let me say, that is the most common feedback that I've gotten on all the chainmail pieces for every piece I put in to be judged. They don't touch. There's gaps. Yes. So just as someone who has been judged a lot on chainmail, definitely take a look. If you see like there's gaps between the ends, check to see if it really is the pieces aren't touching, or if maybe part of that is connected and it's just maybe the cut of the material may not be as good. You could, as a judge, you can still take points off for it. That's fine. Just know that it may be as close as those two ring ends can be together. The test that I use for my own rings is I take my fingernail and I try to push my fingernail through the gap. If it goes through the gap, they're not touching. But if I can't get it through the gap, I can't really get it too much closer than that. It's close enough. Yes. It's much lighter. Yeah. Not may. It is less stable. Not maybe. It is. It is less stable. So. Mm-hmm. if you want to make a piece out of aluminum, you certainly can. The problem is you need to use thicker rings so they bend less. So because the thicker the ring, the less that it will bend on you. So you may have to trade off. You're trading off some weight for strength by using aluminum, but you can trade back some of that weight to get back enough strength so that you can make a piece of armor out of it. It's just a matter of how much weight do you want to trade back with the weight of the rings. Yes. So you'll see it listed as 5/16 inch ID. ID is that inner diameter, and then there'll be a second thing that'll tell you the gauge, 16G or 16GA. So the yes, but yes, but just like I was saying with strength, the more you go up in gauge, the harder these rings will be to bend. Right. Mm-hmm. Oh, there's always more questions with Chainmail. So it's all about it's almost an engineering level considerations with some of these things, especially with larger pieces. What do you want to trade to get what you want? So it's just a matter of figuring out what you can trade. How far you're willing to trade to get the result that you're looking for. And it takes for most people, it takes a lot of time to figure out the nuance of that, to figure out to get a good feel over gauge, inner diameter, what can you do with it. Increasing the inner diameter is the easiest and fastest way to play with your aspect ratio. Gauge has a slightly smaller effect on it, but just like shrinking your gauge size, increasing your inner diameter can actually also hurt the strength of the ring, because it works a lot like a piece of wood. You take a big long piece of wood that's kind of thin, you can crack it in half. Okay, you get that same thickness of wood that's like this long, and like you can't do anything with it. So increasing the inner diameter actually increases the total length of the ring, which can actually make it more easy for it to bend. So again, it's just a consideration to be concerned. Yes. Oh yes. This is why most people just go with 5/16 16 gauge and stick to it. People will generally like to stick to a gauge and inner diameter that they're comfortable with and just stick with it. That's pretty common. It's worse than you think. But if you want to make a large piece, it's worse than you think. A chainmail shirt that will fit me is, and we're talking like short sleeves, big open collar, 10,000 rings, easily 10,000 rings. So best recommend, especially when starting off, small pieces. And if you want colorful, go aluminum. Always go aluminum. Also, if you and everybody else are looking at the Ring Lord, you will see that there's another material, that's rubber. Rubber only comes in closed rings. Okay, so when you're doing the whole open ring, closed ring thing, that is a stepping stone to being able to integrate rubber into your pieces. So the more you get the whole, what can I have open, what can I have closed, everything that's closed, that would be your rubber. Just stick a rubber in there, a rubber ring in there. Yeah. All right. Well, it looks like everybody else has abandoned. There is the over in the chat for here. There is this link to what I'm actually wearing tonight. Please feel free to go check that out. It's very complicated beef. So yeah. Hey, Byzantine in box. If you want to practice chainmail, it's one of the easiest ones. So all right. Well, thank you for coming, and I intend on having another one of these. I was going to ask at the end of this what everybody was interested in seeing next, but as it's just kind of you have entirely the floor here. Would you like to see some more patterns, and if so, what do you think you might want to see of what you know? Okay. Mm-hmm. So I showed this at the beginning. This piece is a sheet of 4-in-1 that just wraps around. Okay? But at the end, it's still 4-in-1, but it's reduced down to a very small number, and then all the edges are all connected together into that. This is yeah. Okay. So there's the started off as a circle and move into the bag. There's also start as a bag and shrink down to a circle. For simplicity's sake, I always recommend starting from the circle and moving into the bag, because there's only a certain number of rings that you can have on that capped end, and if you don't do the math right, you can very much mess yourself up. So I always recommend going from the small circle out to the diameter of the bag that you want, and then just going straight up into regular European 4-in-1 up to the height of the bag that you want. But I can certainly do that. There are definitely some other things that you can do with sheets of European 4-in-1. For example, here we have two pieces of 4-in-1, and you can line them up, and you can get those edges lined up perfectly, and you can just connect them together with rings. Okay, with rings going the other way. Okay, but if you were to say cut this piece of 4-in-1 at an angle and do the same thing on this one, you can actually get these two pieces to connect at an angle. So that's something I could do as well. Mm-hmm. The thing is, they gotta know how to do the European 4-in-1 first. So okay, that's great feedback, and yeah, I think that would be something that would be fun to do. So all right, so if you have no more questions, and looks like no one's coming back, I will end it here. Thank you for Thank you for coming and enjoying my class. And for those watching on YouTube, there'll be more to come. Have a good night, everybody.